I don't think tariffs are the right answer. I don't support tariffs. I think tariffs are taxes. So I just don't think the tariff route is the smart way to go.
Okay, that's the Speaker of the House. As a reminder, Paul Ryan, definitely a Republican, and he's no fan of President Trump's tariffs. But the president, he doesn't agree with him. Here's his tweet from just this morning. Tariffs are the greatest. Then he says, we are the piggy bank that's being robbed. All will be great. So saith the commander. I added that last part. But things aren't that great when it comes to American farmers, China, European Union, Mexico, Canada, and others. They haven't taken these tariffs lying down. They've hit U.S. agriculture with billions of dollars worth of their own tariffs. That includes things like soybeans, pork, orange juice, and more. Gotten so bad, the administration threw up this trial balloon. They want to do $12 billion to farmers, give them to ease the pain because of the tariffs that they implemented. But leading Republicans, they're blasting the plan, many calling it corporate welfare. Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska said the trade war is cutting the legs out of the farmers and giving them golden crutches. The White House, though, not too happy with those comments, but those attacks are coming from his own right flank. So when you think about tariffs, I bet you think about those farmers somewhere in the breadbasket of America, or guys like Harley-Davidson in Wisconsin saying they'll move production to Europe due to the tariffs. Those Midwestern factories getting slammed by the higher costs, or automakers down south worried about the very same thing. But you don't have to look that far. New York State's also being impacted. Trump started a trade war with Canada, and a new report shows the Empire State could lose $1 billion in business due to retaliation from our neighbors up north. The same report says New York, the third hardest hit state. Congressman John Faso, a Republican who represents the Hudson Valley 19th District, he said this in a statement. I'm going to read a portion of it. Quote, these tariffs are going to hurt small manufacturers and their workers by raising the cost of their goods. This, a short-sighted action which will hurt our economy and sow chaos among our allies and American manufacturers. If you close your eyes, this is not the party of Reagan here, where you're talking about going against free trade and doing corporate welfare for people that are impacted by something by the way of their own making. And it's interesting. I read some Republicans say, hey, he's got to do what he's got to do. I mean, some of the electorate, while folks on Capitol Hill are screaming, this is going to kill us in the midterms. What gives?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland in my view. I mean, this is not, from a Republican point of view, it's not what Republicans have done and stood for traditionally. But perhaps more importantly, the impact of this, we haven't gotten it yet. I mean, as this goes on, the poor milk producers in New York State, for example, against Canada, what have you, and that's where all of a sudden this is going to take its toll, not in the public polls, but it's going to take its toll in the pocketbook where people have to spend more. There's a whole nother thing about this that really bothers me, and I think he's way off base if he has, I don't know what he's thinking, and that is the strength of the United States is in its ability to the economy and how it controls it, whether with China or with other countries, in my opinion. And that strength gives us leverage when we need leverage, both in terms of the economy strictly, but also in foreign policy. You give up all of that if you're going to make not just enemies at NATO, but if you're going to make enemies through tariffs. There's no question the Chinese, okay, everybody agrees the Chinese had an advantage to some degree. But where do you draw the line? If you look at the products that we use every day, China is a substantial piece of it.
And they're driving them in the arms of other people. Charlie, did you know that New York, I mean, I figured, you know, the Nebraskas and the Kansas, like I said, the breadbasket at Garrett Farming. But I'll be honest, I didn't know how many onion farmers there were in New York.
That's
the milk.
You've never run for statewide office.
Yes, I was about to say, this comes from the guy in the overalls out in the
And you
fields,
never lost 3 times running for statewide office like I have. But also, if you close your eyes, this is the party of Ronald McDonald, Bozo, and Krusty the Clown. And you're a part of that party. And I think part of the challenge here is that guys like you need to stand up and say that you're not going to support this guy for president. And people like Faso...
He's already done that. Yeah.
Well, but you got to get other people to say that they're not going to support this guy for president. And guys like Faso and others, you're not going to support people like him who enable. I mean, this guy's an enable. This is insane. This is the clown posse that we have there.
But you know what's the funny part, Andrew? He had a point when he started with this. There is legitimate arguments, even with our neighbors up north, that we're getting raw deals when it comes to, for example, milk and the dairy, right? That the Canadians, do have an unfair set of rules. Certainly the Chinese have manipulated currency. But the way to do this, where you shoot first and ask questions later, Scott said it better than me. You're creating an environment where you're trying to drive our consumers to go somewhere else to find their products. It's not like they're going to go hungry until they capitulate. There's other places to go. And we're just starting to feel the pain of this. This will be an election issue that he did all to himself.
Yeah, it's a bullying tactic. I mean, it's instead of trying to negotiate or rework the trade deals that he's not happy with, he's basically using this as leverage that he thinks he has. And he's convinced that if the trade wars escalate, that somehow the United States will win as a result of all this. Meanwhile, in the meantime, prices on goods are going to wind up going up. The soybean crop in the United States, and we produce most of the majority of the world's soybeans. I think it's ready in September, and farmers aren't going to be ready or able to get their money back because of tariffs that are going on towards China and going out towards other Asian countries. It does seem a little pound-wise, penny foolish.
Yeah.
The other thing is, his point is that the trade deficit is a problem, which I'm not necessarily sure that I agree with, and I don't think a lot of economists agree with, because that just means that we buy more goods from other countries than they buy from us. We have more consumers with more money.
And there's a piece today in the Times, Dom, where they go out to like Columbus, Ohio, and people in factories, they're starting to see the pain of this thing. But the people who voted for Trump, and this was anecdotal, it wasn't the real number, they're like, hey, he's got to do what he's got to do. So the question is, when you go to Walmart, wherever you are in the country, and all of a sudden you're starting to pay a lot more, I don't know who can articulate it clearly. Is it fake news to say he did this, guys, right? Or he had to do it because we got to stop taking crap from those foreigners, which will be his argument. Who pays the price for this in November?
Well, one thing that this president is good at, and I agree with all of the criticism that's been tossed out here, one thing he's good at is deflecting and tossing the blame, throwing the hot potato or the football into somebody else's lap. So you're right, he will claim that he had to do this.
But even his own party, who's running on this,
folks
is
are
saying,
speaking up.
whoa,
but it's
big mistake,
ridiculous.
Mr. President.
And Richard, I want to throw a bigger point at you that I thought about this morning. I always argue, as we all do, that all politics are local, right? The president is from New York, right? So what are we benefiting from him going to the White House? I thought about this the other day, and we live in Rockland. We've lost our interest in terms of writing off mortgage interest. Now you're going ahead with this tariff war, and you're pissing off the Canadians and every friend that America has had. So where's the payoff for local residents?
We didn't vote for him.
Whether
That's
we
why.
voted for him or not,
No,
he's
but in his mind, that's it.
Yeah.
New York didn't vote for him, so New York can go screw.
The one thing I love about it is he's transactional enough that you know where he stands on everything before it starts. There's no hidden agenda
No,
here.
he's a bully,
maybe with Putin,
a bully,
but
Richard. And he acts like a bully, and those throughout the world are starting to fight back, and that's what we're seeing now on this tariff.
Well, the
issue.
interesting thing about what Dominic's saying, which I think is dangerous for Trump, is that nobody actually cares anymore whether he's right or wrong and who's to blame. It's kind of like you're either on one side or the other, and it's really calcifying in that way. Fake news, not fake news, he's right, he's wrong. At some point it's either, are you with him, are you against him? Who the hell cares if he's right or wrong? Ultimately, it's calcifying in that way.
you're right. Except if you have a job in Greenville, South Carolina, at that BMW plant, right? And now all of a sudden they're laying off half the people and they're going to tell them, look at me, guys. President put tariffs on, and all of a sudden we can't make our margins here anymore. We're going to start putting the jobs in Mexico, whatever else. Now all of a sudden, you may hate the fake news and everything else, but you still got to pay your mortgage. You still got to put the food on the table. I wonder how that shakes out from now to November. All right, when we come back, we do talk about November and Election Day. The midterm's fast approaching. Well, what are the Democrats going to do? Because they got their own challenge. We talk about the Tea Party on the right here. Well, progressives and moderates in the Democratic Party are not exactly on the same page here, but we've got some numbers that actually might be good news when it comes to trending for the folks in blue. We'll explain after this.